Lyara Venthal stood before the full-length mirror in her family's ancestral home, her forearms adjusting the ceremonial sash that marked her new status as a bonded mate. The pale blue fabric contrasted sharply against her chitinous, deep purple skin, and her compound eyes caught every angle of her reflection simultaneously. Her mother entered the chamber with the clicking footsteps characteristic of their species, mandibles moving in what humans might call a smile, but Kalthari understood as concern. "You seem troubled." "Daughter," her mother said, antennae drooping slightly, "I am merely adjusting to the reality of my situation," Lyara replied, keeping her voice steady and diplomatic as always. It was what she did best, after all. Being one of the youngest diplomats ever appointed to the Galactic Coalition's cultural exchange program, the human, her mother stated rather than asked. Lyara's antennae twitched in acknowledgement. Yes. The human Marcus Chun had arrived at the bonding ceremony 3 days prior, escorted by Terran embassy officials who seemed almost apologetic about his presence. He was tall by human standards, lean rather than bulky, with dark hair kept short and eyes that reminded Lyara of the deep space between stars. What struck her most was his silence. Humans were known throughout the galaxy for being loud, emotional, and chaotic. They laughed too much, cried openly, and seemed incapable of restraint in any social setting. The Kryn called them the shouting mammals, while the serene Velothians found their constant chatter exhausting. Yet Marcus Chun barely spoke during the 3-day bonding ritual, where couples traditionally shared stories and learned about each other's cultures. Marcus had responded to questions with single words or brief phrases. When asked about his homeworld, he said, "Earth, Eastern Continent." When asked about his family, he said, "Gone." When asked about his interests, he said, "Gardening." Her father had been insulted, calling it disrespectful. Her siblings whispered that perhaps this human was defective. Oya thought he was simply strange. The marriage was political. Of course, the Kalthari didn't bond for love, but for alliance and mutual benefit. Humanity was new to the coalition. Barely 50 years as members, and marriages between species helped solidify diplomatic ties. Marcus worked at the Terran embassy as what his documentation called a cultural liaison, though Lyara noticed the description was frustratingly vague. He would help her understand human customs, and she would guide him through Kaltharian society. They had moved into a modest apartment in the diplomatic quarter of Kalthara Prime's capital city. The space was a blend of both their cultures, with Lyra's traditional woven wall hangings next to Marcus's sparse, minimalist furniture. He kept his possessions to a minimum: clothes, a few books, cooking implements, and a locked case he placed in the study without explanation. Lyra didn't ask about it. Privacy was respected in Kaltharian culture, and besides, they were still strangers bound by ceremony rather than genuine connection. Their daily routine developed quickly. Lyra left early for the coalition offices, where she worked on trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. Marcus stayed home most days, tending to a small garden he had started on their balcony when she returned in the evenings. She often found him there, kneeling among the plants with absolute focus. His movements were slow and deliberate, almost meditative, as he pruned leaves or watered soil. "Did you have a good day?" she would ask. "Yes," he would reply. "What did you do?" "Tended the garden." "Did anything interesting happen?" "No." It was maddening in its simplicity. Yet, she noticed things about him that didn't match the brief responses. He noticed everything. His dark eyes tracking movement and assessing spaces with an intensity that seemed at odds with his peaceful gardening. When they walked through the city together, he positioned himself slightly behind and to her left, always maintaining a clear view of their surroundings. He never truly seemed to sleep. Either Yara's species required only 4 hours of rest per cycle, but she often woke in the night to find Marcus sitting by the window, utterly still, watching the city lights. When she asked if he was well, he simply nodded at social gatherings, which Liara attended frequently as part of her duties. Marcus accompanied her without complaint. He stood quietly while she networked with other diplomats, occasionally answering direct questions, but never initiating conversation. Other species found him peculiar. "Is your human broken?" a Velothian colleague asked once, their translated voice tinkling like bells. "He is merely reserved," Liara defended. Though she wasn't entirely sure herself, a Kryn warrior diplomat, towering at 8 feet with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian, had laughed at Marcus during one reception. "I heard humans were fierce and unpredictable, but this one seems more like a decoration than a mate." Marcus's expression hadn't changed at all. He simply looked at the Kryn with those dark, calm eyes until the warrior moved away. Suddenly, uncomfortably, Elia found herself watching her husband more carefully after that. There was something in the way he moved, a precision and economy of motion that suggested training rather than natural grace. When he reached for objects, his hands moved in straight, efficient lines. When he turned, his whole body pivoted smoothly. She began to wonder what a cultural liaison actually did. The locked case bothered her more as weeks passed. It sat in the study, a reinforced container roughly a meter long and narrow, with a biometric lock keyed only to Marcus's genetic signature. She never saw him open it, never saw what it contained 6 weeks into their marriage. An ornate invitation arrived via diplomatic courier. The Grand Coalition Summit was being held on Nexus Arch, the massive rotating space station that served as neutral ground for the galaxy's most important negotiations. Liel was required to attend as part of the Caltharian delegation. "Will you come with me?" she asked Marcus that evening as they shared a meal. He had learned to cook Caltharian cuisine with the same methodical precision he applied to everything he looked up from his plate. Those dark eyes meeting her compound gaze. "Yes, it will be 3 weeks away from home. I understand. There will be many social obligations and formal events. I will accompany you." She felt a flutter of something, not quite nervousness, but anticipation. This would be their first extended time together away from the familiar routine they had established. "Marcus," she ventured, using his name directly for the first time in days, "do you enjoy being married to me?" He was quiet for a long moment, and she thought he might retreat into monosyllables again instead. He said, "You are kind and intelligent. You make our home peaceful. I am grateful to be here." It was the longest statement he had ever made to her, and something in his tone made her antennae lift with pleasure. Perhaps there was more to her silent human than she had realized. The transport to Nexus Arch departed in 4 days, and Liara found herself looking forward to the journey with unexpected interest. Maybe away from their daily patterns, she might finally learn who Marcus Chen really was. She had no idea how right she would be, or how terrifying the truth would turn out to be. The transport ship to Nexus Arch was a coalition vessel, sleek and efficient, designed to carry diplomats from dozens of species in reasonable comfort. Liara and Marcus shared a small cabin with 2 sleep pods and a viewing port that showed the swirling colors of faster-than-light travel. This was the first time they had truly been alone together for an extended period, away from the routines and distractions of home. Liara found herself acutely aware of Marcus's presence in the confined space, moved through the cabin with that same precise efficiency, unpacking his minimal belongings and arranging them with careful deliberation. The locked case came with him, and he secured it in the storage compartment beneath his sleep pod. "What is in the case?" Liara finally asked, her curiosity overcoming her sense of privacy. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "Something from my past. Is it dangerous?" "Only if it needs to be." The answer told her nothing and everything at once. She decided not to press further, instead focusing on reviewing the summit materials. There would be over 300 diplomats attending, representing 47 coalition species and a dozen associate members. The agenda was packed with sessions on trade disputes, territorial boundaries, and cultural exchange programs. Tensions had been rising in several sectors, particularly regarding the aggressive expansion of the Kryn Dominion into contested space as night cycles passed during their journey. Liara noticed Marcus never seemed to fully rest. He would lie in his sleep pod for the required hours, but she could see through the transparent lid that his eyes remained open, alert. "Do you ever actually sleep?" she asked on the third night, lightly. "Why?" He was silent for several heartbeats, then said something that chilled her despite the climate-controlled cabin. Old habits on the 5th day of travel. They shared a meal in the ship's common dining area. Other diplomats were present, including a delegation of Velothians whose crystalline bodies chimed softly as they moved, and a pair of Kryn warriors whose massive frames barely fit into the standard seating. One of the Kryn, his scales a deep crimson, noticed Marcus and made a sound that the translation devices rendered as laughter. "The silent human," he boomed, his voice carrying across the entire dining hall. "I have heard of you from Kalthara Prime. They say you are the quietest human in the galaxy." Marcus didn't respond, continuing to eat his meal with steady, measured movements. "Are you defective?" The Kryn pressed, moving closer. "Did your creators forget to install the noisemaker that all humans possess?" Lyra's antennae flattened against her head in anger, but before she could speak, Marcus looked up. His eyes met the Kryn's, and for just a moment, Lyra saw something flicker in those dark depths, something cold and assessing. "I speak when I have something worth saying," Marcus said, quietly. Kryn laughed again, but Lyra noticed he moved back to his own table rather quickly. A Velothian diplomat nearby chimed softly to Lyra. "Your human is unusual. Most of his kind are so eager to fill silence with words." "He is different," Lyra agreed, watching Marcus return to his meal as though nothing had happened that night. Unable to sleep during her rest cycle, Lyra found Marcus standing at the viewing port, watching the hyperspace patterns. "Marcus," she ventured, "what did you do before becoming a cultural liaison?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I served humanity in other ways." "Military service?" "Something like that. Why did you stop?" Another long pause, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. "Because I needed to remember what peace felt like." She wanted to ask more, but something in his posture told her the conversation was over. Instead, she stood beside him at the viewport, and they watched the stars streak past in comfortable silence. Nexus Arch appeared on the 7th day, a massive rotating wheel in space, its spokes connecting the outer ring to a central hub. The station was over 10 kilometers in diameter, housing not just diplomatic facilities, but entire neighborhoods, parks, and commercial districts. It was a symbol of coalition unity, built collaboratively by a dozen species. Their shuttle docked at one of the outer ports, and Lyra felt her hearts quicken with anticipation. This was the largest summit she had ever attended, and the Kaltharian delegation was counting on her to represent their interests. Marcus stayed close as they disembarked, his hand resting lightly on her lower back, a human gesture of partnership. She had learned their quarters were in the diplomatic wing, a spacious suite with separate sleeping areas and a central living space. Large windows looked out onto the station's interior park, where alien vegetation from 100 worlds grew under artificial sunlight. The summit began the next day with an opening ceremony. Hundreds of diplomats filled the Grand Assembly Hall, their various forms and sizes creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. Lyra attended the first session on trade agreements, with Marcus shadowing her silently. She noticed he positioned himself where he could see all the entrances, his eyes constantly scanning the room during a break. A Kaltharian colleague approached her with concern written in the angle of his antennae. Lyra, I need to share something troubling, he said. Pulling her aside, Marcus followed, a silent presence. What is it? There are rumors of discontent among some delegations, particularly the Kryn. They want to disrupt the summit. Perhaps even see it fail entirely. Lyra felt her lower arms twitch with anxiety. Do you have evidence? Only whispers and overheard conversations, but the tension is real. That evening, she shared this information with Marcus. As they prepared for sleep, she expected dismissal or minimal interest, but instead, he asked 3 precise questions that surprised her. Which specific Kryn delegates are involved? What do they hope to gain from disruption? Who on the station would benefit from increased tensions? The questions revealed a strategic mind she hadn't known her husband possessed. They discussed the situation for over an hour. Longer than any previous conversation they'd had. Marcus's insights were sharp and tactical, suggesting he understood power dynamics and threat assessment far better than any cultural liaison should. You seem to know a lot about conflict, she observed. I've seen my share over the next 3 days. The summit proceeded with mounting tension. The Kryn delegates became increasingly aggressive in their demands, pushing for territorial concessions that other species found unacceptably. Ira attended session after session, while Marcus remained her constant shadow. She began to notice other diplomats watching him with expressions ranging from curiosity to unease on the 4th night. As they returned to their quarters after a particularly contentious session, Marcus did something unprecedented. He stopped her at the door. Tomorrow, I need you to stay in our quarters. Lyra's antennae rose in surprise and indignation. I have 3 critical sessions tomorrow. I cannot simply skip them. Something is wrong, he said. And for the first time since she'd known him, she heard urgency in his voice. The patterns are all there. Escalating rhetoric, strategic positioning, unusual movements in the station's maintenance areas. What are you talking about? I think someone is planning to attack the summit. She stared at him, trying to process this. That's impossible. Nexus. Arch has the best security in the galaxy. Security can be compromised, even if you're right. I cannot hide while my colleagues face danger. I have duties, responsibilities. Marcus's jaw tightened, and she saw conflict in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. Then stay close to me, no matter what happens. You stay within my reach. Why would that matter? He looked at her with those dark, calm eyes that suddenly seemed to hold depths she had never imagined. Because I will keep you safe. The certainty in his voice was absolute, almost frightening in its intensity. Marcus, what exactly were you before you became a cultural liaison? Someone who kept people safe, he said quietly. Someone who stopped threats before they became disasters. She wanted to press for more details, but something in his expression told her she wasn't ready for the full truth that night. She lay in her sleep pod, unable to rest, thinking about her strange, silent husband. She had married him as a political arrangement, a necessary alliance between species, but now she realized she had no idea who he really was or what he was capable of. The next day would bring answers she never wanted to know, and horrors she would never forget. But it would also show her that sometimes the quietest people are the most dangerous, and sometimes that danger is exactly what keeps you alive. The diplomatic reception was held in Nexus Arch's grandest hall, a circular chamber with transparent walls that looked out into the starfield. Hundreds of delegates mingled beneath floating light installations, their conversations creating a symphony of languages and translation devices. Liara wore her formal diplomatic attire, all 4 arms adorned with traditional Caltharian bangles that chimed softly with each movement. Marcus wore a simple human suit, dark and understated, but she noticed the locked case was now a smaller version, secured to his side like a briefcase. You brought it, she observed. Yes. Why? Insurance. The word made her compound eyes focus on him with new intensity. But before she could question further, a Velothian colleague approached to discuss trade negotiations. And Lyara was pulled into the social currents of diplomacy. Marcus remained nearby, silent and watchful as always. An hour into the reception, Lyara was deep in conversation with a delegation from the mineral-rich Kordak system when the station trembled. It was subtle at first, just a slight vibration through the floor. Then the lights flickered. Conversations paused as hundreds of diplomats looked around in confusion. Nexus Arch's systems were supposed to be flawless, maintained by the galaxy's best engineers. The second explosion was not subtle at all. The blast came from somewhere in the station's outer ring, powerful enough to shake the entire chamber. Several delegates stumbled, and the transparent walls showed flashes of fire in the distance before anyone could react. The hall's main entrance exploded inward in a shower of debris and smoke. Through the smoke came figures, massive Kryn warriors in combat armor, their scales gleaming in the emergency lighting, along with mercenaries of various species, all heavily armed. The lead Kryn, his scales a deep crimson that Lyara recognized from the transport ship, roared in a voice that needed no translation. "This summit ends now." Chaos erupted. Delegates screamed and scattered. Security personnel rushed forward but were cut down by weapons fire. Lyara stood frozen, her forearms trembling as her mind struggled to process the sudden violence. Then a hand gripped her upper right arm. Marcus, pulling her behind a massive decorative column. "Stay down," he said. And his voice had changed, still quiet, but now carrying absolute command. Two station security guards nearby tried to form a defensive line. They lasted 3 seconds before Kryn warriors tore through them with brutal efficiency. Celia watched in horror as one of the warriors turned toward their position, his predatory eyes locking onto her. He was 8 feet of muscle and killing instinct. Built by evolution on a death world, he advanced with a roar. Claws extended. Marcus stepped out from behind the column, positioning himself directly between the Kryn and Lyra. The warrior laughed, a sound like grinding stone. The silent human. "Do you think you can stop me with your weakness?" Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he opened the case. What emerged made Lyra's heart skip in unison. A blade, long and curved, catching the emergency lights with a gleam that suggested countless hours of careful maintenance. The weapon was elegant and deadly, clearly designed by human hands for human use. The Kryn's laughter grew louder. A primitive blade? Against modern warriors? Marcus's hands moved to the weapon with perfect familiarity, his stance shifting into something Lyra had never seen from him. Low, balanced, weight distributed with mathematical precision, and then he moved. Lyra's compound eyes could track multiple angles simultaneously, process motion faster than most species. But even she struggled to follow what happened next. Marcus flowed forward like water, his body moving with such efficiency that no motion was wasted. The blade sang as it left its sheath, a sound like wind through high mountain passes. 3 seconds. In 3 seconds, the Kryn warrior was on his knees, his weapons scattered across the floor, and Marcus's blade rested against the warrior's throat with such steadiness it might have been carved from stone. The Kryn's eyes were wide with shock and fear. "Don't move," Marcus said quietly. 2 more mercenaries rushed toward them, weapons raised. Lyra wanted to scream a warning, but Marcus was already turning. The blade moved in arcs so precise they seemed choreographed, each motion connecting to the next in perfect sequence. The first mercenary's weapon clattered away, his arm disabled with a strike Lyra barely saw. The second found himself on the ground, Marcus's foot on his chest and the blade pointing at his face. "Stay down," Marcus repeated, his voice still that same quiet tone. But now Lyra heard something beneath the quietness. Focus, certainty, and years of experience, more attackers came. And Marcus moved among them like wind through grass. He didn't kill unnecessarily. She noticed. Instead, disarming and disabling with surgical precision, each movement was economical. Each strike placed with perfect accuracy. A blade meant to cut his head off met his sword at an angle that redirected the force harmlessly past him. The claw meant to disembowel him found only air as he shifted his weight. A plasma bolt that should have burned through his chest missed by millimeters as he pivoted. He was dancing, Liara realized. But it was a dance of violence so refined it approached art. "Behind me," he said without looking at her. Somehow knowing exactly where she was. "Stay low." She obeyed without thought. Her diplomatic training useless in this situation. All she could do was watch as her quiet, gardening husband cut through trained warriors like they were children. A Kryn warrior bigger than the others charged with a roar that shook the chamber. Marcus didn't retreat or brace for impact. Instead, he stepped into the charge, his blade finding the exact joint in the warrior's armor where flexibility met protection. The massive alien crashed to the ground. Clutching his disabled leg, another warrior tried to flank them, coming from behind while Marcus engaged two others. Liara opened her mandibles to shout a warning. Marcus was already moving, spinning with his blade extended at precisely the right height and angle. The flanking warrior's weapon flew from his grip, and a follow-up strike to his knee dropped him. "How many?" Marcus asked calmly. And Liara realized with shock that he was asking her for tactical information. She quickly scanned the hall with her multiple viewing angles. 7 more attackers visible, 3 near the north entrance, 4 trying to reach the emergency exits. Civilians? Most have evacuated, but there are wounded near the west wall. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Stay here. Don't move unless I call for you." Before she could protest, he was gone, moving with speed that seemed impossible for his frame. He flowed across the chamber, blade catching the light with each movement. The 3 attackers near the north entrance saw him coming and raised their weapons. Marcus dropped low, sliding beneath their line of fire, and his blade found their legs in quick succession. They fell, disarmed and disabled, but alive. The 4 near the emergency exits turned to face this new threat. And Liara saw one was another massive Kryn warrior. This one with scales like polished obsidian. "I know you." The Kryn roared. "You are one of the Silent Regiment. They said you were all retired, broken by your wars." For the first time, Marcus spoke more than a few words in combat. "I am retired, but you threatened innocence. So now you deal with what I was." The fight was brief and brutal. The Kryn warrior was trained, experienced and powerful, but Marcus was something beyond. He moved like he could see the future, his blade intercepting attacks before they fully developed. When the obsidian-scaled warrior finally fell, Marcus stood over him, not even breathing hard. Station security finally arrived in force, flooding into the chamber with weapons drawn. They saw the scene before them. Dozens of attackers disabled and disarmed. One silent human standing among them with a blade that had drawn no blood. The security commander, a grizzled Kordax veteran, stared at Marcus with recognition dawning in his eyes. "Silent Regiment," he breathed. "I didn't know any of you were still active." Marcus said nothing, simply wiped his blade clean and sheathed it with movements that spoke of ritual and respect. Then he turned and walked back to Liara, his posture relaxing slightly as he approached. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She couldn't speak, her mandibles trembling. All 4 of her arms were shaking. Marcus knelt beside her, his dark eyes meeting her compound gaze. "You're safe now. I kept my promise." "What?" Her voice failed, and she had to start again. "What are you?" "I told you," he said quietly. "I used to keep people safe." Security personnel swarmed around them, securing the attackers and checking for more threats. Medical teams arrived to treat the wounded. Through it all, Marcus stayed beside Lyra, his presence steady and calm, as though he hadn't just single-handedly stopped a coordinated assault by trained warriors, but Lyra saw him differently now. The quiet man who tended gardens with meditative focus was the same person who moved through combat like death incarnate. The blade he carried wasn't ceremonial or decorative. It was a tool, worn from use, marked by countless encounters. Her silent husband was a weapon, refined and honed to perfection, and she had no idea who she had really married. The question burned in her mind as emergency crews worked around them. What else didn't she know? What other secrets hid behind those calm, dark eyes? The attack was over. The immediate danger passed, but Lyra's understanding of her husband had been shattered, and she knew nothing would ever be the same between them. The medical bay was chaos for hours after the attack. Wounded diplomats from a dozen species received treatment while security forces interrogated captured mercenaries and tried to piece together how such a coordinated assault had breached. Nexus Arch's supposedly impenetrable defenses. Lyra sat in a private room, draped in a thermal blanket despite the comfortable temperature shock, the human medic had explained. Though Kalthari physiology didn't experience shock the same way humans did, what she felt was something deeper than physical shock. It was the complete dissolution of her understanding of reality. Marcus stood by the window, his blade case once again locked and secured. He had refused medical attention despite several minor injuries, instead staying close to her as Coalition investigators came and went. The security commander, a Kordax named Farrell with skin like burnished copper, entered the room with a datapad and a grim expression. Lyra Venthal, "I need to ask your husband some questions," he said, his multifaceted voice carrying the weight of authority. "He's already given his statement," Lyra protested, her antennae flattening defensively. "Not about the attack," Darrell said, his crystalline eyes fixing on Marcus. "About who he really is." Marcus turned from the window, his face as calm as ever. Ask Therrell's datapad projected a holographic display. Personnel files. Military records, all heavily redacted with black bars covering most of the text. Marcus Chun, formerly of the Terran Special Operations Division, specifically the unit designated Silent Regiment. Thurl read. 15 years active service. Deployed to, well, everywhere. The files don't say where you were deployed, which tells me everything I need to know. Lyra's compound eyes widened. Silent Regiment? The most classified military unit in human space, Thurl explained. Not unkindly. They don't officially exist. No records. No public acknowledgement. No medals or honors. They're the ones humanity sends when diplomatic and conventional military options have failed. Marcus remained silent, his expression unchanging. How many combat deployments? Thurl asked. I don't recall the exact number. The portions of your file I can access say over 200. Lyra made a sound like wind through hollow tubes. 200? That meant years, possibly over a decade, in constant combat. Why did you retire? Thurl continued. I was no longer fit for that kind of service. The file says you were medically discharged for psychological trauma, what humans call post-traumatic stress disorder. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The only sign of discomfort. Yes, and the diplomatic integration program placed you at the cultural liaison course, Thurl said, setting down his datapad. A program designed to help soldiers like you transition back to civilian life by giving you structured, peaceful work. That is correct. Thurl looked at Lyra, and she saw something like sympathy in his expression. Did you know any of this when you married him? No, Lyra whispered. I was told he was a cultural liaison, nothing more. The Coalition doesn't advertise this program, Thurl explained. It's considered a humanitarian effort, helping warriors who have given too much find peace again. The marriages are arranged specifically with partners who are stable, patient, and unlikely to trigger combat stress responses. Liara felt something cold settle in her lower torso. You mean I was chosen to, what? Rehabilitate him? To help him heal, Thurl corrected gently. And from what I've observed, you've done well. Until today, Marcus had not engaged in combat for over 2 years. His longest peaceful period since joining the military at age 18. The number struck Liara. 18 was barely an adult by human standards. How old is he now? 35, 17 years. He had spent 17 years as a soldier. 15 of those in the most dangerous operations humanity could conceive. I need to speak with my husband alone, Liara said. Her voice, steadier than she felt, Thurl nodded and left. The door sealing behind him with a soft hiss for a long moment. Neither of them spoke. Marcus remained by the window, his posture relaxed but somehow still alert. While Liara processed the enormity of what she had learned, finally, she stood. Her forearms trembling with emotion she couldn't quite name. Anger? Fear? Betrayal? You let me think you were just quiet, she said, her voice sharp. You let me think you were a simple liaison who preferred gardening to conversation. I never lied to you. You omitted everything. Her antennae stood rigid with fury. You let me believe I was marrying a peaceful man. Someone ordinary and safe. I am those things, Marcus said, finally turning to face her. I am trying to be those things. You're a killer. I was a soldier, he corrected quietly. There's a difference. Is there? She gestured wildly at the door. They said 200 deployments. How many people have you killed, Marcus? How many? His dark eyes held hers, and for the first time, she saw pain there, real. Deep pain. Too many. The answer, so simple and honest, deflated her anger like a punctured bladder. She sank back onto the medical bed, her antennae drooping. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice smaller now. Marcus was quiet for several heartbeats. And when he spoke, the words came slowly, carefully chosen. Because I wanted to be the man you deserve to have, not the weapon I was made to be. What does that mean? He moved closer, but stopped at a respectful distance. For 15 years, I was a tool. A very sharp, very effective tool that humanity pointed at problems and said, fix this. I fixed them. I stopped threats before they became wars. Eliminated targets before they could kill innocents. Infiltrated places where one mistake meant death. His voice remained quiet, but emotion leaked through. I was good at it. Too good. I never questioned orders. Never hesitated. Never failed. And every deployment, every mission, every target, they took pieces of who I had been before. Liara watched as her husband, this man she barely knew, revealed himself for the first time. When they finally discharged me, I couldn't function in normal society, he continued. I couldn't sleep without weapons nearby. I couldn't sit with my back to doors. I couldn't stop analyzing everyone as either threats or assets. My family had died while I was deployed. And I had no friends because I'd spent 15 years with people who are all dead now. His hands, those steady hands that wielded a blade with perfect precision, trembled slightly. The integration program offered me a chance at something I thought I'd lost forever. A life, he said, a quiet life, with structure and purpose that didn't involve violence. They assigned me to cultural liaison work, gave me training in diplomacy and patience, and then they arranged a marriage because they said I needed human connection. Even if it wasn't with another human, Liara felt her anger transforming into something more complex, understanding. Perhaps, or the beginnings of it. When I met you, I saw someone kind and intelligent, Marcus said. Someone who filled silence with productive work instead of empty chatter. Someone who appreciated peace. I wanted to be worthy of you. So I tried to become the man I thought you needed. Quiet, stable, harmless. But you're not harmless. No, he agreed. I'm not. I'm controlled. There's a difference. She thought about the garden he tended so carefully. The meditative focus he brought to simple tasks. The garden. What is it really? His expression softened slightly. Every plant represents someone I couldn't save during my deployments, civilians caught in crossfire. Allies who died covering my extraction. Targets who turned out to be innocent, but I only learned that after. I tend them to remember, to honor, to do penance. The revelation made Lyra's heart ache. You carry so much pain. I earned it. That's not how pain works. Marcus. He looked surprised, as though this thought had never occurred to him. Lyra stood again. Moving closer. You saved dozens of people today. You could have killed every attacker easily. I saw that much, but you didn't. You disabled them, disarmed them, gave them the chance to surrender. Killing should always be the last option. But you were trained to make it the first option, weren't you? Yes, so you chose differently, she said, her antennae rising slightly. That's not a weapon making choices. That's a person. Marcus's composure cracked. Just slightly. I didn't want you to see me as a killer. I wanted you to see me as someone who could be your partner. Someone worthy of the peaceful life you represent. Lyra reached out with her upper right arm, hesitating just before touching him. I don't know how to process all of this. I married a stranger. And now I've learned that stranger is even more of a stranger than I thought. I understand if you want to dissolve the marriage bond, Marcus said quietly. I would not blame you. She considered this. The arrangement had been political. After all, there were procedures for ending bonds that didn't work. But when she looked at him, she didn't just see the deadly warrior from the reception hall. She also saw the man who tended a memorial garden every morning, who made her tea without being asked, who had spent 2 years trying to learn peace. I need time, she said finally. Time to understand who you really are, all of you. Not just the pieces you thought I wanted to see. That's fair. And you need to actually talk to me. Marcus, real conversation, not 3-word answers. For the first time since she'd known him. He almost smiled. I can try. Trying is enough, she said. For now. Outside the medical bay. Nexus Arch slowly returned to order. The summit would continue, strengthened paradoxically by the attack that tried to destroy it. The Grand Coalition Summit reconvened 3 days after the attack, and the mood had shifted dramatically. What had begun as routine political negotiations now carried the weight of near disaster, and delegates who had previously bickered over minor territorial disputes now spoke with urgent cooperation. Lias stood before the assembled diplomats, her forearms steady despite the nervousness fluttering through her torso. This was the largest audience she had ever addressed, and what she was about to say would either help heal the coalition or create new divisions. Marcus stood in the back of the chamber, as quiet and watchful as ever, but now Lyra understood what that watchfulness meant. He wasn't disengaged or bored. He was protecting, assessing, ready honored delegates, she began, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustic systems. I stand before you not just as a representative of Calthar Prime, but as someone who experienced the attack firsthand. The chamber fell silent. Hundreds of eyes and sensory organs focused on her. Many of you witnessed what happened. You saw the violence, the chaos, the attempt to destroy everything this summit represents, she continued. And you saw someone stop it, my husband. Marcus Chen. Murmurs rippled through the audience, some curious, some uncomfortable. I have learned in recent days that Marcus is not simply a cultural liaison, Lyra said, choosing her words with diplomatic precision. He is a veteran of humanity's Special Operations Forces, a soldier who served for 15 years in the most dangerous conflicts in human space. The murmurs grew louder, and she saw several Kryn delegates shifting uneasily. They understood what that meant better than most. When I discovered this truth, I was angry, she admitted. I felt deceived, betrayed even. I had married a man I thought was peaceful and quiet, only to learn he was one of humanity's most dangerous warriors. She paused, letting her antennae rise in what Kalthari recognized as emphasis. But then I watched the recordings of the attack. I studied what he did, how he did it. The chamber's main display activated, showing footage from security cameras. Marcus moving through combat with precision and control, disabling attackers without killing. He could have killed every single attacker, Liara said, her voice growing stronger. He had the skill, the weapons, the justification. They were armed terrorists attempting mass murder by every legal and moral standard. Lethal force would have been justified. She let that sink in before continuing. But he didn't kill them. He disarmed and disabled, gave chances to surrender, used exactly the minimum force necessary to protect innocents on the screen. Marcus stood among dozens of fallen attackers, none of them dead, all of them alive to face justice. That is not the action of a mindless weapon, Liar declared. That is the choice of a person who has seen too much death and refuses to add to it unnecessarily. That is restraint born from experience and wisdom. A Velothian delegate chimed a question. What is your point, Honored Vental? My point is that the Coalition created the Diplomatic Integration Program to help warriors find peace after service. Liara answered. We take individuals who have been shaped by violence and give them the opportunity to contribute to society in peaceful ways. We recognize that people can change, can grow, can choose differently than their past would suggest. She gestured to Marcus in the back of the chamber. My husband is living proof that this program works. For 2 years, he lived peacefully, tending gardens and learning diplomacy. He only returned to combat when innocent lives were at stake. And even then, he chose the path of minimal harm. The Kryn delegation leader, a scarred warrior named Cross, stood. You defend this human, but one of the warriors of our culture. We are told we are too aggressive, too violent for diplomatic roles. Liara had anticipated this. The integration program is open to all species, she said. If Kryn warriors wish to transition from military service to peaceful contributions, the Coalition should support that. We should expand the program, not limit it. This caused a stir. The idea of helping Kryn warriors become diplomats seemed radical to some delegates. We fear what we don't understand, Liara continued. Before the attack, many of you saw Marcus as strange, defective, perhaps even weak because he was quiet. You judged him based on stereotypes about humans being loud and chaotic. You were wrong. She let her compound eyes sweep across the assembly. How many other judgments are we making based on stereotypes and fear? How many opportunities for cooperation are we missing because we can't see past our assumptions? A human delegate from the Terran embassy stood. Ambassador Chun, no relation to Marcus. A distinguished woman with silver hair. The Honored Vental makes an excellent point. Humanity joined the Coalition only 50 years ago, and we still struggle with how other species perceive us. Too emotional, too violent, too unpredictable. Yet individuals like Marcus Chun show that humans can be disciplined, controlled, and capable of great restraint. Other delegates began to speak, and what emerged was a broader conversation about integration, understanding, and cooperation. The attack had been meant to divide the Coalition, but Liara was using it to call for greater unity. After the session ended, Liara found herself surrounded by other diplomats, some offering support, others asking detailed questions about the integration program. Marcus waited patiently, and when the crowd finally dispersed, he approached with something she had rarely seen on his face: gratitude. Thank you, he said quietly, for defending not just me, but others like me. I meant every word, she replied. Though I admit I'm still processing all of this. You're not the person I thought you were. I know. I'm sorry. She held up one hand to stop him. Let me finish. You're not the person I thought you were, but you might be someone better, someone more complex and real." They walked together through Nexus Arch's interior gardens, a space designed to provide peace amid the political tensions. Alien flowers bloomed in colors that had no names in either of their languages. "I've been thinking about your garden at home," Liara said. "The one where each plant is a memorial." "What about it?" "It's beautiful and sad at the same time, very human. I think this capacity to hold contradictory emotions simultaneously." Marcus considered this. "I never thought of it that way for me. It's just necessary. When we return home, I would like to help you tend it," Liara said. "If you'll teach me." He stopped walking, surprise clear on his face. "You want to help?" "I want to understand," she corrected. "And I think understanding comes through shared experience. You've spent 2 years learning about Caltharian culture. Perhaps it's time I learned about human culture, the real culture, not just the diplomatic version." Over the next week, as the summit continued its work, Liara and Marcus spent their evenings actually talking, real conversations. Not the 3-word exchanges that had characterized their first months together. He told her about Earth, about growing up in what humans called the Pacific Northwest, about forests so dense that sunlight barely reached the ground, about joining the military at 18 because he wanted to protect people, wanted to matter. She told him about Calthara Prime, about the intricate social hierarchies of her species, about the pressure she felt as a young diplomat trying to prove herself worthy of her family's legacy. They discovered they had more in common than either had expected. Both were trying to live up to impossible standards. Both carried the weight of expectations. Both found peace and quiet. Structured activities. "Why gardening?" she asked one evening as they sat in the quarters living area. "It's creation instead of destruction," Marcus answered. "For 15 years, my job was to break things, to disable, neutralize, eliminate. Gardening is the opposite. You nurture, protect, help things grow. It's therapeutic. Do you still have nightmares?" He was quiet for a moment. "Yes. Less than before. But yes. Some things don't leave you." "What helps?" "Knowing I'm not that person anymore, or at least, knowing I don't have to be that person unless absolutely necessary." Lyra's antennae drooped sympathetically. "The attack must have been difficult for you, returning to that state." "It was like putting on old clothes that still fit perfectly," he admitted. "The muscle memory, the reflexes, the tactical thinking, it all came back instantly, and that scared me more than the attackers did." "Why?" "Because it reminded me how easy it would be to slip back," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "To become the weapon again instead of staying the person." She reached out with one hand, and this time she didn't hesitate. She touched his arm, a gesture of comfort. "But you didn't slip back. You did what was necessary, and then stopped. That's strength, Marcus, real strength." He looked at her hand on his arm, then met her compound eyes. "I don't deserve you. That's not for you to decide," she said firmly. "I'll determine my own worth and who deserves me." For the first time since she'd known him, Marcus actually smiled, not just a slight quirk of lips, but a real, genuine smile. The summit concluded with new agreements on cooperation and security, and the attempted attack became a catalyst for positive change rather than division. The integration program received expanded funding and support from multiple species on their last day aboard Nexus Arch. Liara and Marcus stood at the observation deck, watching ships come and go against the starfield. "What happens when we return home?" Liara asked. "We continue learning about each other," Marcus said. "We tend the